Disability is a natural part of the human experience, and in no way diminishes the rights of an individual to participate in or contribute to society. Improving educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy of ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. In order to understand the basics of special education or specially designed instruction, you need to first know a little bit of the history. On November 29, 1975, President Gerald Ford signed into law the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act, Public Law 94-142. It's now known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. In adopting this landmark civil rights measure, Congress opened public school doors for millions of children with disabilities and laid the foundation of the country's commitment to ensuring that children with disabilities have opportunities to develop their talents, share their gifts, and contribute to their communities. This law guaranteed access to a free and appropriate public education in the least restricted environment to every child with a disability. Subsequent amendments, as reflected in the IDEA, have led to an increased emphasis on access to the general education curriculum, the provision of services for young children from birth through 5, transition planning, and accountability for achievement for students with disabilities. The IDEA upholds and protects the rights of infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. In the last 40-plus years, we have advanced our expectations for all children, including children with disabilities. Classrooms have been more inclusive, and the future of children with disabilities is brighter. Significant progress has been made toward protecting the rights of, meeting the individual needs of, and improving educational results and outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. Since 1975, we have progressed from excluding nearly 1.8 million children with disabilities from public schools to providing special education and related services designed to meet their individual needs to more than 7.5 million children with disabilities in 2018-2019. In 2018-2019, more than 64% of children with disabilities are in the general education classroom 80% or more of the day, and early intervention services are being provided to more than 400,000 infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families. Other accomplishments directly attributable to the IDEA include educating more children in their neighborhood schools rather than in separate schools and institutions, and contributing to improvements in the rate of high school graduation, post-secondary enrollment, and post-school employment for youth with disabilities who have benefited from IDEA. This stands in stark contrast to what life was like before. Many children were denied access to education and opportunities to learn. In 1970, U.S. schools educated only 1 in 5 children with disabilities, and many states had laws excluding certain children, including children who were deaf, blind, emotionally disturbed, or had intellectual disabilities. And many states had statutes actually prohibiting educating students who had disabilities with other students. Before the EHA's enactment, the fate of many individuals with disabilities was likely dim. Many individuals lived in state institutions for persons with intellectual disabilities or mental illnesses. Many of these restrictive settings provided only minimal food, clothing, and shelter, and persons with disabilities were often merely accommodated rather than assessed, educated, and rehabilitated. Further, most families were not afforded the opportunity to take part in planning or placement decisions regarding their child, and resources were not available to enable children with significant disabilities to live at home and receive an education at neighborhood schools in their community. To see what conditions were like for many students, watch CBS's Suffer the Little Children. It was a documentary on Pennhurst, where over nearly 8 decades, from 1908 to even 1987, Pennhurst was home to 10,600 children and adults with cognitive disabilities. And this was a landmark expose, was a call for the nation to change direction and embrace the angels of our better nature. IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It ensures that all children with disabilities have available to them a free and appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and then to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. It ensures that the rights of children with disabilities and parents of such children are protected, and it assists states, localities, education service agencies, and federal agencies to provide for the education of all children with disabilities. It assists states in the implementation of a statewide, comprehensive, coordinated, multidisciplinary, interagency system of early intervention services for infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families. And it ensures that educators and parents have the necessary tools to improve educational results for children with disabilities by supporting system improvement activities, coordinated research and personnel preparation, coordinated technical assistance, dissemination and support, and technology development and media services. And it assesses and ensures the effectiveness of and efforts to educate children with disabilities. IDEA places 2 big responsibilities on states and their public schools. First, school districts must provide a free and appropriate public education to kids with disabilities. And these kids must learn side by side with their peers as much as possible. And this is something called the Least Restrictive Environment, or LRE. Schools must be able to find and evaluate students who may have disabilities, and it's at no cost to families. And this is called Child Find. If a child has a qualifying disability, schools must offer special education and any needed related services like speech therapy, and to meet the child's unique needs. These are provided through an individualized education program, or an IEP. And the goal is to have students make meaningful progress in school. Second, schools have to give parents a voice in their child's education, and it's at every point in the process IDEA gives parents specific rights and protections, and these are called procedural safeguards. One safeguard is that a school must get consent from parents before providing services to kids. And the reach of IDEA goes beyond what we think of traditional public schools. It includes public, magnet, and charter schools as well. And the law also provides early intervention services to students and toddlers up to age 3. Not every child is eligible for special education under IDEA, and having a diagnosis does not guarantee eligibility. To qualify, kids must have a disability that falls under one of the 13 categories IDEA covers. And those 13 categories are autism, deafblindness, deafness, developmental delay, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, other health impairment, which will include ADHD, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment, including blindness. However, having one of these disabilities doesn't automatically qualify a child under IDEA. To be eligible, a student must have a disability and, as a result of that disability, need special education in order to make progress in school. So let's talk a little bit about the steps. So step 1, a child is identified as possibly needing special education and related services. The next step, step 2, is evaluation. When children are struggling in school, the possibility exists that they may have a disability, and the evaluation process under IDEA, which is intended to determine if, indeed, there is a disability affecting a child's school's progress, and if so, whether that child needs special education and related services in order to make meaningful progress. After the evaluation, the team comes together, where a group of qualified professionals and the parents look at the child's evaluation results. Together, they decide if the child is a child with a disability as defined by IDEA. This group can decide any of the following: that the child indeed has a disability as defined by IDEA and does not need specially designed instruction. They can decide the child has a disability as defined by IDEA and does need specially designed instruction. Or they can decide that the child does not have a disability as defined by IDEA and therefore would not need specially designed instruction or special education. They may also decide that they need more information in order to make this decision. Now, if parents disagree with the eligibility decision, they may ask for a hearing to challenge it. If the child is found to be a child with a disability, as defined by IDEA, he or she is eligible for special education and related services, and the IEP team will now write an IEP for this child. The school system schedules and conducts the IEP meeting. School staff must contact the participants, including the parents. Notify the parents early enough so they are able to have an opportunity to attend. They must schedule the meeting at a time and place that is agreeable to parents and the school. They must tell the parents the purpose, the time, and the location of the meeting. They need to tell the parents who will be attending, and tell the parents that they may invite people to the meeting who have knowledge or special expertise of their child. The IEP team gathers to talk about the child's needs and write the student's IEP. Parents and the student, when it's appropriate, are part of this team. If the child's placement is decided by a different group, the parents must be part of that group as well. Before the school system may provide special education and related services to the child for the first time, the parents must give consent. The child begins to receive services as soon as possible after the meeting. If the parents do not agree with the IEP and the placement, they may discuss their concern with other members of the IEP team and try and work out an agreement. If they still disagree, parents can ask for a mediation, or the school may offer a mediation, or they could file a complaint and may request a due process hearing. The child's progress towards the annual goals are measured, as stated in the IEP. His or her parents are regularly informed of their child's progress and whether that progress is enough for that child to achieve the goals by the end of the IEP year. These progress reports must be given to parents at least as often as when report cards come out for all students. The child's IEP is reviewed by the IEP team at least once a year, or more often if the parents or the school ask for a review. If necessary, the IEP is revised. Parents, as team members, must be invited to these meetings. Parents can make suggestions for changes, can agree or disagree with IEP goals, and agree or disagree with the placement. If parents do not agree with the IEP and placement, they may discuss their concerns with other members of the IEP team and try and work out an agreement. And then there are several options to go to if they cannot reach an agreement. Now we're going to go a little bit more in depth about the IEP, or the Individualized Education Plan or Program. The IEP is the cornerstone in the education of every child with a disability. So let's learn more about it. The IEP should improve teaching, learning, and results. Each child's IEP describes, among other things, the educational program that has been designed to meet this child's unique needs. An IEP is more than just a written legal document or a plan. It's a map that lays out the program of special education instruction, supports, and services kids need to make progress and thrive in school. So let's do a high-level look at what's inside an IEP before we get into some of the details. You can expect to see in an IEP the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, annual goals for the student, how the student's progress towards those goals will be measured, the special education, any related services or supplementary aids and services that will be provided to or on behalf of the student, and that includes program modifications or supports for school staff. An explanation of the extent, if any, to which the student will not participate with children without disabilities in the regular class and in school activities. Any accommodations or modifications your child will need when taking state or district-wide assessments, the dates when services will begin and end, the amount of services, as well as how often and where they will take place. How and when the parents will be informed of their child's progress, and by age 14, post-secondary goals and transition services, including course of study, that this student will need to reach these goals. And beginning at least 1 year before the student reaches the age of adulthood, the IEP must include statements that the student has been informed of their rights that will transfer to him or her upon reaching this age. And reaching the age of adulthood is called the age of majority in IDEA. So let's go in and look a little bit deeper at a present level. Here is an example of a present level statement. Results of standardized testing using the Woodcock-Johnson show that David's basic reading skills are at the beginning 4th grade level, with a standard score of 89. His basic writing skills are at a 3.7 grade level with a standard score of 81. This is objective data from the evaluation. His performance in basic reading and writing is significantly below his ability. So when David makes errors when he reads and has difficulty decoding long words, which is a weakness, but his comprehension skills are strong, so that is a relative strength. Now David uses context clues and picture cues to help him understand what he is reading, and that helps him learn. And he has a strong reading vocabulary. When writing, David frequently misspells words and uses incorrect punctuation, which is a weakness. It is much easier for David to express himself by speaking rather than by writing. He sometimes gets frustrated when writing and hurries through written work, and that hinders his learning. Often, the present level statement includes teacher observations as well as information from evaluations. This information can give a more complete picture of what helps the student learn and what limits the student's learning. For example, he needs a quiet, separate place to do individual work. She learns quickly when working in a small group. He understands and remembers what he hears about a subject. Learning by reading or looking at pictures is difficult and doesn't work as well for him. She imitates other children and learns from them. A clearly written and thorough present levels is important because it is the foundation for all of the IEP. Goals are written based upon the student's present levels, Special education and related services are provided based upon the student's present levels and the goals that result from those present levels. So it's important for a team to take their time in writing the present level statements. Be thorough. The information that's included will be the stepping stone to writing the rest of the IEP. Once the student's needs are identified, the IEP team works to develop these appropriate goals to address those needs. And an annual goal describes what the student can be expected to learn within a 12-month period, and that's sometimes called the IEP year. A well-written goal should be A, positive, and B, describe a skill that can be seen and measured. It answers the following questions. Who will achieve? What is the skill or the behavior? How? In what manner or in what level? Where? In what setting or under what conditions? And when? By what time? And what's the ending date? So here's an example of an annual goal written for David, whose present levels of academic achievement and functional performance were shown above. The IEP team developed this reading goal for David by looking at the information in the present levels. So, an annual goal for reading: David will achieve a reading score at the 5th grade level or above as measured by the qualitative reading inventory by the end of the IEP year. Effective goals are critical parts of a student's IEP. Keeping track of students' progress is just as important. How will the IEP team know if the student is making enough progress to reach a goal by the end of the year? This information must be included in the IEP. The IEP team must decide how the student's progress will be measured and when periodic reports of this student's progress will be provided to the parent. Special education is instruction that is specially designed to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. This means that education is individually designed to address each student's needs. So since each child is unique, it is sometimes difficult to give an overall example of what special education is. It's individualized for each child. And special education for any student can consist of any individualized curriculum that is different from the same age peers who do not have disabilities, and for example, teaching a student who is blind to read and write using Braille. And then the same general education curriculum that's used for peers without disabilities, but with adaptations or accommodations made for the student. And that's going to be discussed in more detail in a moment. Or it could be a combination of these elements. It's also important to remember that the education, services, and supports outlined in each student's IEP does not necessarily cover each student's entire education. The IEP only addresses those educational needs resulting from the student's disability. So if a student needs special education supports throughout the school day for all activities, the IEP will cover all of these needs. If the student doesn't need special education support in one or more areas, for example, physical education, music, or science, then the IEP will not include these subjects. Your child will access them through the general education curriculum in class with no additional special education services. It is also especially important to understand that special education is not a place. It's a set of services that can be provided in many different places depending on the student's needs. IDEA strongly prefers that students with disabilities be educated in the general education classroom with their peers without disabilities. So if a student is going to spend any part of the school day not participating with peers without disabilities in the regular ed classroom and in other school activities, then the IEP must include an explanation as to why or why not. That's not to say that providing any part of a specially designed instruction in a small group special education classroom isn't appropriate or important. Sometimes it can be, and that becomes the least restricted environment for that student, so that student can make meaningful progress. To help a child benefit from special education, He or she may also need extra help in one area or another, such as speaking or moving, and this additional help is called related services. The purpose of a related service in special education is so that a student can benefit from the special education or their specially designed instruction. So let's look at some of the possible related services that a student may need so they can benefit from special education. It could be assistive technology, audiology, interpreting services. Maybe it's occupational therapy or orientation and mobility services. It could be physical therapy, psychological services, recreation. It could be rehabilitation counseling. It could be school health services or school nurse services. It could be for social work services that are in the school. It could be speech-language pathology or special transportation. Students' IEPs will also have accommodations and/or modifications. An accommodation changes how a student learns the material, whereas a modification changes what a student is taught or expected to learn. Accommodations. Accommodations can help kids learn the same material as their peers, and this allows them to meet the same expectations. So a student who has dyslexia, for example, might listen to an audio version of a book, but it's still the same book that the rest of the class is reading. Likewise, a student who has trouble focusing might get seated next to the teacher, but still have to do all the regular class assignments. Modifications are different. Some kids are way far behind their peers, and they may need changes to the curriculum that they're learning, and these are called modifications. For example, a student could be assigned a shorter or easier reading assignment or homework that's different from the rest of the class. Kids who receive modifications are not expected to learn the same exact material as their classmates. Some students, they do engage in behaviors that impede their learning or that of others. And when that happens, accommodations or a behavior intervention plan can help. Each person who supports the student in an educational setting may be responsible for providing these accommodations, depending on how and where it is written in the IEP. Students may also have a BIP, or a behavior intervention plan. The goal of the BIP is to increase desired behavior while preventing and decreasing problem behavior. So let's talk a little bit what that might look like. So some students who may have autism or may have an emotional disturbance identification for anxiety or depression, often they have low self-esteem or they have high stress points, and they might engage in self-injurious behaviors. And so we can look at some accommodations and modifications. So they could have an established a quiet cool-off area. We can teach them self-talk to relieve stress and anxiety. We can teach and put in place self-monitoring and self-control techniques. We can also provide time for relaxation techniques. And then we would need to be aware of our speech and our nonverbal cues when we're talking to the student. This was just a quick overview of special education or specially designed instruction. But we would be remiss to not point out that sometimes it feels like special education has its own language, something we often refer to affectionately as acronym soup. So we're going to show you a few of those acronyms, and you've heard some of them throughout this video. And please pay attention because there will be a test.
That's great, it starts with an IEP, diagnosis, YCDD, placement in ECSE. Struggle with communication, get yourself an SOB, SETT, needed for AAC, fine motor OT, gross motor PT, gotta go to gym class, gonna need some APE, what's the proper LRE, teaching all don't know why, DESC, Map-A starts grade 3, summer school is ESY, Pilgrims are CBI, CO has an IRC, SOR needs to be clean, APM DTT, FBA for BIP, token economy. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. Why, oh why? VBIS, CIT in distress, MCI by CPI. Watch your hair and watch your eyes. If they get an SD, what will the response be? Expressive R, FO3, 3 to 4, CVE, FAPB, BPGC, HOHZZ. What does all this data mean? BDSA, buy it or you'll have to pay. ACEPS, wanna see your progress. Plus Delta, CCI, CCI. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. Why, oh why? Why, oh These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. Why, oh why? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Look at the dichotomy. H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. Can anybody follow? P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. Try to make it easy. W, X, Y, Z. Learning new vocabulary. All this jargon makes it easy to communicate. Right? Right? These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. Why, oh why? These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. Why, oh why? These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. Why, oh why? These are special education acronyms. These are special education acronyms. These are special education
Rio Rancho Public Schools currently uses a software application called PowerSchool Special Programs. You may hear it called PSSP or just SP. It houses all of the documentation and moves teams through the process of supporting students in need through SAT in the Student Assistance Team, 504s, and in special education.